So think about the laptop sitting on your desk right now. It's probably packed with gigabytes of old files, heavy software updates just waiting to install, and a fan that occasionally sounds like a jet engine prepping for takeoff, right? Now, I want you to imagine a computer where virtually nothing important actually lives on the hard drive. A machine where your applications, your files, and your entire workspace exist almost entirely in the cloud. It sounds like a pretty radical departure from the desktop computers we all grew up with, doesn't it? Well, today we're looking at exactly that. We're breaking down a totally cloud-first operating system to understand how it fundamentally shifts the way we think about speed, security, and software. Welcome to this explainer.
Okay, let's dive into this. chromeOS is essentially a lightweight, Linux-based, browser-first solution developed by Google. If you've ever used a Chromebook, well, you've used chromeOS. But what actually goes on under the hood is a genuinely fascinating rethinking of modern computing architecture. It strips away decades of legacy bloat and local processing overhead to focus entirely on the web. It's a real game changer for how a computer operates on a daily basis.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with a clear definition of what chromeOS actually is and how you deploy it. Then we'll get into its unique sandbox security model, followed by how it handles those seamless system updates. After that, we'll objectively weigh what it's best at against where it falls short, and finally clarify the real differences between standard Chromebooks and chromeOS Flex.
Let's start with Section 1, Welcome to chromeOS. We need to fundamentally define what this OS is and how it shifts the entire computing paradigm away from traditional local storage.
So the absolute crucial point to grasp here is that chromeOS is a cloud-centric operating system. You know, it's funny, when it first shipped way back in 2011, early versions were pretty much just a Chrome web browser slapped on top of Ubuntu Linux. But wow, it has evolved massively since then. Today, it's a fully realized operating system. It's capable of running progressive web apps, which, if you aren't familiar, are basically websites that act and feel exactly like native desktop apps, as well as full Linux environments and even Android applications. And it manages to do all of this while maintaining that core philosophy of prioritizing the cloud over heavy local desktop software. Because the whole system is so incredibly lightweight, the installation procedure is surprisingly simple. For IT admins managing hundreds of devices, deploying a chromeOS image just requires a standard USB 2.0 drive with at least 4 gigs of space. You just use the Chromebook recovery utility to build the image, boot the device, and connect to Wi-Fi. And here's a pro tip for enterprise setups. This is almost like a cheat code that saves IT departments literally hours of headaches. After you accept the terms, but right before signing in, just hit Control-Alt-E. That simple keyboard shortcut triggers the enterprise enrollment step, instantly pulling down all the management policies, restrictions, and network settings your organization needs, all in one go.
Moving on to Section 2, Sandboxing and Built-in Security. In the chromeOS ecosystem, system security is treated as an absolute necessity, definitely not an optional luxury. And the way they pull off that baseline security is brilliant. chromeOS utilizes a process called sandboxing. Every single open tab in the browser, every progressive web app, every little background process, they are all heavily isolated in their own individual sandbox. They enforce super strict boundaries. Think of it like a submarine with watertight doors. If one room floods, or in our case, if you accidentally click a malicious link in one random tab, the malware is trapped right there. The watertight doors seal shut. It can't communicate with other tabs, and it absolutely cannot reach the underlying operating system. But wait, what happens when you run an Android app downloaded from the Google Play Store? Because Android runs untrusted third-party code, right? That seems like a pretty glaring security risk. Well, to solve this, chromeOS utilizes something called ArcVM. Think of ArcVM as a secure, invisible vault where the Android app is allowed to play around to do its job, but it absolutely cannot touch the actual operating system walls. It guarantees Google's strict security promises are kept completely intact, allowing you to run external code without putting the wider system at risk. Let's jump to Section 3, Seamless Cloud-Based Updates. Beyond sandboxing, the other massive pillar of the security model is how the system handles updates, using a dual partition architecture. This creates an unbreakable chain of trust every single time you turn the computer on. It's a process called verified boot. The literal second you hit the power button, read-only firmware checks a cryptographic signature provided by Google. Think of it as an unbreakable digital wax seal used to verify the read-write firmware. Then, that firmware verifies the system kernel, and finally, the kernel verifies every single block of the operating system and browser before it even lets you log in. Think about how this flows in practice. Load, check signature, verify. Load, check signature, verify.
If at any point in this chain a single piece of code doesn't perfectly match Google's cryptographic hash, say a highly sophisticated piece of malware somehow managed to sneak in, the boot process instantly halts. There's no compromise. It immediately falls back and reboots using a clean, completely untouched backup image stored safely on the device's hardware security module. Now, this specific backup architecture brings us to a massive paradigm shift in everyday user experience. With traditional operating systems, a system update usually means 20 to 30 minutes of active downtime, staring at a spinning wheel, usually right when you're 5 minutes late for a crucial Zoom meeting, right? Because chromeOS stores two distinct, separate OS images right on the device, updates happen completely transparently in the background. They download roughly every 6 weeks while you just keep working. When it's done, you reboot, which takes maybe 10 seconds, and the active partition simply flips over to the newly updated image. All of this sandboxing, the verified booting, and those completely seamless background updates lead to an absolutely incredible statistic: 0. As of mid-2026, cybersecurity firms report that managed chromeOS devices have experienced literally 0 reported ransomware attacks. 0. By intentionally keeping the attack surface small and making updates essentially mandatory without interrupting the user, businesses see a massive 90% reduction in incremental security risks. That is huge.
Section 4, where chromeOS shines, we know is a wildly secure platform, but let's transition into an objective breakdown of the practical, everyday hardware and lifestyle benefits.
Because it leans so heavily on the cloud rather than heavy local processing, chromeOS doesn't need hot, power-hungry internal components. This means battery life routinely exceeds 10 to 18 hours on a single charge. Boot-ups take a lightning-fast 5 to 15 seconds. Without heavy internal hard drives or massive cooling fans, these devices are incredibly lightweight, often just 2 to 5 pounds, and manufacturers can afford to build them tough. Many are built to mil-stand 810G military durability specs. We're talking spill-resistant keyboards, thick rubber bumpers. That makes them a massive favorite in K-12 education because, let's be honest, a 7th grader's backpack is basically a war zone. And finally, because the required components are so minimal, the value is undeniable. You can easily find highly capable devices for well under $200.
Section 5, the drawbacks of chromeOS. Because, of course, no tool is perfectly suited for every single job. Let's pivot and look at the objective limitations of this OS. The biggest operational hurdle, hands down, is its heavy reliance on an active internet connection. While offline capabilities for web apps like Google Docs have vastly improved over the years, the system is still going to struggle if you're completely off the grid. Secondly, chromeOS is a relatively closed environment. You cannot run traditional Windows executable files, those .exe files, or macOS apps natively. That means advanced resource-heavy software like the full Adobe Creative Suite, AutoCAD, or professional audio tools like Avid Pro Tools simply aren't compatible. Also, due to the lower RAM limits common in these devices and that lack of native support, it is entirely inadequate for heavy, graphically intense AAA desktop gaming. Ultimately, if your business or hobby absolutely relies on legacy desktop software, this operating system is going to be a major roadblock. Finally, Section 6, Chromebooks versus chromeOS Flex. We need to clarify the distinct differences within the ecosystem itself. Now, what's really interesting here is the contrast between buying dedicated hardware versus reviving an old PC. chromeOS Flex is a free version of the operating system that you can actually install on older Intel or AMD Windows or Macs to bring them back to life. But there is a catch. Flex does not support Android applications. It also doesn't have the hardware security module required for Google's specific verified boot, though it does use UEFI Secure Boot, which is an industry-standard protocol that ensures your PC only boots using software trusted by the manufacturer. It also lacks deeper integration features like Phone Hub. So it's a fantastic free way to turn a sluggish old laptop into a fast, highly secure web browsing machine, but it is definitely a slightly stripped-down experience compared to a fully optimized, dedicated Chromebook. Which leaves us here with a pretty big question to ponder. We've seen how chromeOS purposefully strips away local bloat to deliver unparalleled, zero ransomware security, lightning-fast background updates, and highly affordable hardware. But we've also seen that it requires a very real sacrifice when it comes to offline capability and legacy software compatibility. So ask yourself, do you truly need a heavy local storage desktop machine? Or is the cloud-first trade-off exactly the right paradigm shift for your personal computing habits? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this really helped demystify exactly what's going on under the hood of chromeOS. Catch you next time.